Good afternoon. The continuance of meeting originally convened on April 4th of the Windward Planning Commission at 9 a.m. will now come to order. It is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. The time is 1:00 p.m. The continuance of this meeting is streamed on YouTube. At this time, I'll introduce our commissioners. Vice Chair Louis Daniele III,
Good afternoon.
Commissioner Wayne Deleuze,
Sorry, good afternoon.
Commissioner Lauren Baylog is absent and excused. I have Commissioner Chantel Perrin.
Good afternoon.
Commissioner Matthias Kusch is also absent and excused. And I'm Chairperson Lynn. We have a quorum to hold this meeting. From the Office of the Corporation Counsel, we have Deputy Corporation Counsel Susanna Tiapula, attorney for the Commission, who is present to advise the Commission.
Aloha.
Deputy Corporation Counsel Jean Campbell, attorney for the Planning Department. Representing the Planning Department, Deputy Planning Director Jeffrey Darrow is present to advise the Commission.
Aloha.
Commissioners, please confirm that you've had an opportunity to review the materials related to the applications being reviewed today. I'll start with verbal, just around the dais here. Commissioner Deleuze, have you had an opportunity to review the materials?
Yes.
Vice Chair Daniele
Yes.
and Commissioner Perrin.
Yes, I have.
Okay. I note that each commissioner has verbally confirmed having an opportunity to review the application materials and all submitted testimony, and I have reviewed that as well. Housekeeping items, please turn off or silence your cell phones. Public restrooms are located in the middle of the building on the Mackay side. If there is anyone here who would like to testify in person, please fill out the yellow sign-up form at the staff table. Also, if you have any written testimony that has not been sent earlier, you may submit it now to staff. All right. So is there any testimony right now? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So anybody else want to testify on? Oh, it's just, okay, we're just going for the first agenda item, which is Bill 121. Because this is a continued hearing on agenda item number 5, Bill 121. Public testimony has concluded and there is no further testimony on this item. The commission will continue to discuss, deliberate, and decide and act upon this item. At the April 4th meeting, Commissioner Kusch made a motion and Commissioner Perrin seconded the motion to forward a favorable recommendation to the County Council on Bill 121. This motion is still active. A supplemental motion was made by myself and seconded by Vice Chair Daniele that the commission review each of the planning director's recommendations with discussions before entertaining any further amendments to Bill 121. A voice vote was taken and the motion carried with all in favor. In discussion on recommendation number 8, Commissioner Kusch made a motion to amend the language in the last sentence ending quote, and code amendments, unquote, by adding the language, quote, from the time the dwelling was built, unquote. For clarification, the added language would be, quote, and code requirements from the time the dwelling was built or modified, unquote, and it was seconded by myself. A roll call vote was taken and the motion carried with 5 ayes, with Commissioner Kusch, Daniele, Deleuze, Perrin, and myself, no noes, and 1 commissioner excused, which was Commissioner Baylog. The commission then ended the discussion at recommendation 8. So right now, the Windward Planning Commission is required to take action on Bill 121 and submit their recommendations to the County Council by May 29th, 2024. In the event that the commission fails to act on the proposed bill by this date, such inaction shall be considered as an unfavorable recommendation by the commission. The commission may recommend approval of all, some, or none of the director's suggested recommendations. The commission may also recommend its own revisions to the bill. So at this time, because we've had significant time to review this application or this bill and the director's recommendations, I'd like to propose that I withdraw the supplemental motion to review each of the planning director's recommendations because each commission has had time to review it. So as a original maker of the motion to review each of the director's recommendations, I now move to withdraw that motion so that we can further discuss this bill in a broader scope. So that's the motion on the table. Is there a second? Oh, I don't need a second. Oh, I just need majority. Yeah, is there any opposition to this motion to withdraw the review of the director's recommendations? Okay. Okay, with that, we are back at the original motion, which is a motion to forward a favorable recommendation for the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And just to clarify for the record, the supplemental motion is then withdrawn. Thank you.
Okay, so now we are back to original motion, which is a motion for a favorable recommendation be forwarded onto the county council on Bill 121. So we will now further discuss this bill in more detail. So at this time, commissioners, you have the option of proposing additional amendments or recommendations to this bill. So I'd like to open up for commissioners. If you'd like to discuss a specific portion of this bill or specific questions for Deputy Planning Director Darrell here or the staff members here regarding this bill. I have a question for staff. In the FAQ that Chair Kimball provided, it stated that 2023 had a total listing of about 6,000 short-term rentals on Hawaii Island, and only about a little less than 100 complaints made in that time period. Is that confirmed? Is that, or what is she, I guess, is that data that we have here at the planning department that's available?
Chair, I currently don't have that data on me right now. I'm sure our staff could produce that data for you. Possibly Jeff could, or Deputy Director Darrow could speak a little more about that.
Aloha, Chair Lynn. Yeah, give me a minute or two. I know that I recently requested that information from staff. I don't believe it had the information on violations though, or complaints. As mentioned previously, a lot of our complaints they come in as STVRs, like these people are operating illegal STVRs. When staff conducts investigations, it comes out that a lot of these are actually hosted. And so at that point, we're not currently regulating hosted rentals. But I know that I do have the information regarding the amounts. I thought it was closer to 4,000, but let me confirm that as far as STVRs.
Thank you.
There was a breakdown of registered and NUCs.
Commissioners, any comments or discussions on this bill so far?
Okay, so this was March 19th. Total registered STVRs was 4,714. Of those, 3,785 were STVRs and 929 were non-conforming use certificates.
Thank you, Director Darrow. I guess my intention of asking that question is because the information that Chair Kimball provided basically said that there's less than 10% of what her number was complaints of illegal STVRs. So for me, it's why are we creating regulation for this if there's only so few complaints for these units? So that's kind of my thought process right now and it just doesn't make sense to me. If there's only that small amount of complaints, it seems unreasonable to make it so that a small batch of people have now punished a whole community of users of this product or service. So that's kind of my general thinking of where I am on this bill. I also have reservations on the hosted segments of this bill. If somebody actually lives on their property, I don't think that needs to be regulated. I think if it's somebody who has a property manager that's managing their property, that should be the responsibility of the property manager to make sure that they're following the rules and all that. And I'm not sure how the hosting platforms feel on this issue and how we are going to come to an agreement as a county to regulate those big firms. But I think if somebody's living in their house, on their property, and they're renting out a room, I don't think that should apply. I think it's those who actually have professional management that this should apply to. But that's kind of my thought there. The other thought that I had is regarding the ADU part. And if somebody has a Ohana or an ADU on their property, I don't see why they can't do this and why it's prohibited under this bill. But if I don't know if other commissioners want to
Yeah.
discuss that or
Yeah,
have
I
any
think,
comments.
I'm in agreement with Chair Lynn. I think that the language in this is, again, rather draconian in terms of, what one has to do if there's complaints, having the police there or having someone there within an hour. It just, to me, it does not make sense to regulate people conducting business, on their private property. as long as they're in the scope of, general compliance. I think we're delving way too deep into, people's private matters personally. Telling people where they can live on their property, what building they can live in. Um, I really don't understand the intention behind that. The more regulation you have is not always a good thing. I think people have been doing this for quite a long time. Out here and probably every other island. And it's a valid source of extra income for a lot of folks, as we heard in our last meeting. A lot of these folks are probably on a fixed budget. They're retired. As we know, the cost of living in Hawaii is extremely high. And this is their way to make it. And so I think that putting the burden on individuals, the private public, to solve problems that are probably more at a county or a state level is not right. So, a lot of the language in there, I have a problem with. Especially the mapping of the property and where people can live and how soon someone has to be on site if there is a complaint. I mean, again, it's government overreach. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Danielle. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, if I don't see any other comments or discussion, then the motion still stands right now for a favorable recommendation to the county council. So we will first have to hear the motion. So if there are no other comments on this motion, then we would call a roll call vote right now on that motion. So seeing no other commissioners with their lights on and any comments, we will call a roll call vote by staff.
Commissioner Parent,
Ole.
Vice Chair Daniele,
Hey,
Commissioner Deleuze,
I,
and Chair Lynn.
No.
The motion does not carry.
Thank you, staff. So at this time, it's unfavorable recommendation to the county council.
Chair.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so this motion has failed. So now, is there another motion for unfavorable recommendation or any proposed recommendations to council for this bill? Because the council will still have to hear it, and they would still like to hear our commentary and discussions on it. So I would like to make a motion for changes in, or the following recommendations. Okay, so we have to make this one first. Okay. So move that an unfavorable recommendation be forwarded to the county council on bill number 121, docket number PL-CCI-2024-00003, based on the recommendations that I will be proposing. Would that work? Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. So now I would like to propose some recommendations. The first recommendation that I would like to propose is that we really try to focus in on what the economic impact of this bill is. Because like I said last time, if we lose a proportion of these short-term vacation rentals, we have events and we have activities here on Hawaii Island that our hotels cannot support. And then we lose out on economic opportunity. An example is such as Merry Monarch Festival. Another one is we have upcoming the World Sprints for the canoe paddling regattas. These will bring in thousands of people to Hawaii Island. And where do they stay? Hula halaus have to rent out a whole house to house their halaus. If not, they're sleeping in the gym. That would be my first one, is we really have to measure the impact that it would have on our economy if we lose these units. The second one that I would propose is that we remove the hosted units from this bill. And we make sure that we have the ones that have professional property managers and the hosting platforms in there, but I would remove the consideration of hosted, owner hosted, correct? So if you own the property, you're living on the property and you're renting out a room, that would be what I would be asking to, as a recommendation, to exempt. I also want to include that the ADUs be allowed to be a short-term vacation rental. I think it's unfair if you have property and you need to make ends meet, why not be able to rent that out? So the additional recommendation is that I believe the quiet time hours, those are unreasonable and should follow whatever the county already follows in terms of quiet time. I mean, I believe there's a Hawaii revised statutes on noise pollution that has specific hours from like 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. But we should be in line with what we already have existing, and not to cause any confusion for the community in terms of what one department says to do versus what everybody else has to follow. Additionally, it's the affidavit that I would remove. And I agree with the planning director's recommendation to make it a declaration instead. Sorry, let me pull up what else I have here. Okay, I would also like to ask for a analysis of where the funds that would be charged for the TARs and how they're going to be appropriated. Because if they're only going to be charged for enforcement, it's kind of I kind of think doesn't work. If we're creating something, charging a fee to just regulate that one thing, but there's no other benefit to the county, I don't think that makes sense. Separate from like GE tax and TAT and all that kind of stuff, right? But I think that just creating positions just to enforce something that we created doesn't make sense to me.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yeah, I think also, we have to think about, where these are being proposed to be allowed. I think you have to have ag in there. I think you have to let this happen on ag as well. You have to. I mean, all the big subdivisions in this county are zoned ag. So by excluding that, that makes zero sense to me whatsoever. No, that would be a recommendation to add ag in as well. There's no provision for that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, Vice Chair.
Yeah.
Did you want the planning director to respond to the issue of ag?
He can, but I still think that you have to add that in there since most of the island's in ag.
Director Darrell, do you have any comments on the ag portion?
Sure. The main issue with agriculture, we find with not all the properties in ag, but a majority of them is the dual zoning between the state land use and the county zoning. So we can monitor and make changes to our county zoning, but the state land use commission has to make the changes to their permitted uses in the state land use. So basically the bill says you can do this, but you have to comply with chapter 205, which means that basically 205 says you have to be a farm dwelling in the state land use act. And so that's where the issue comes about is they do have an allowance in 205 4.5 to allow overnight accommodations in conjunction with agricultural tourism. But they've only made it allowed on Maui. They say the county with 3 islands. They did not expand it to us. So basically, overnight accommodations in ag land is frowned upon by the Land Use Commission. That's just been something we've been dealing with. In fact, that's what is in court right now over the original Bill 108, is that issue between agricultural lands and short-term vacation rentals. It's still going through the process. Once that conclusion happens, that's going to provide some insight and direction for us. But currently, we're required by law to comply with HRS 205. So we're saying you can do this in ag, but you have to comply with chapter 205. And there are ways to do that. So it's not, they're saying it's not permitted. There are ways to do it, but you just have to be aware there are certain dwellings you cannot do it in. One of them, as we have spoken about, is an additional farm dwelling, which has very strict conditions regarding farm worker housing.
Shouldn't there be some language in there explaining that to people?
Well,
I mean, the layperson is not really going to know that. They're going to read that and they say, well, how come ag is out? There should be something in there.
There's
Yeah.
the reference to chapter 205, but there's also the very clear saying that this cannot occur within an additional farm dwelling. So that's the clarity. I mean, we can try to look at providing even more clarity to that, but in regards to all of the time we've spent on that, we wanted to make it clear there were certain dwellings in the ag district that this just would conflict with chapter 205. But again, there is options in the state land use ag, especially in the older subdivisions, Hove being one, HPP, others that are older subdivisions.
Thanks for the clarification.
And just to ask for clarification from the commission, the question is whether or not you're recommending that the bill be forwarded with an unfavorable recommendation with the statements articulated as the reasons for an unfavorable recommendation, or are you recommending a favorable recommendation if they adopt your recommended changes? And if you need an executive session to go into executive session for a legal discussion of that, I'm happy to do it. I just need to make sure we clarify that for the record, because some of the recommendations sound like, well, it sounds like a mix, but I just want to be very clear whether we're sending it with a favorable recommendation based on what you are recommending council change in the bill, or an unfavorable recommendation and then stating the reasons for that unfavorable recommendation.
Thank you, Council. My intention with the motion is to forward an unfavorable recommendation with the stated reasons, if they use these recommendations to redraft the bill, I would feel better about how it was written. Yeah, that is my intention. I mean, commissioners, this is just, my proposed recommendations. Feel free to, discuss and disagree. I mean, that's what this forum is about. I'm not here to dictate. These are, my views on how I read this bill and what I feel would be more palatable for the community and those that are currently in the STVR and now TAR realm. And if I may, Council, I would like to also state that I do agree with the 30-day recommendation that the department has stated here instead of the 180 days. Because I believe like if it's a 180-day rental, that's a 6-month lease. And that should be a long-term and covered under the landlord tenant code. I apologize, those in the audience, we're reading through the information, so if it doesn't look like we're looking at you, it's because we're looking at the proposed bill and the planning director's recommendations here.
I mean, I think there's another question on the gathering size. Does that mean, and this might be a question to staff, are they saying gathering size in here? It says the calculation of gathering size is limited to 2 times the overnight limit, with the requirement that gathering sizes must use off-street parking available. Are you saying that if you have two guests, that you only have 2 more people at any sort of event? Is that what that, am I reading that correctly? 2 times or?
I don't think you're going to, and Tracy, you can chime in. The limit, the guest limit is what the issue is. So the way the bill is written right now is if you have a 4-bedroom house, you can have 2 persons per bedroom plus 2 for the unit. So that would be a total of 10 people to stay in that's the limit. The gathering size limit would be double that, 20 people. And so that's where they came up with that calculation as far as a gathering size. And as far as the parking, they want to try to accommodate parking on site, but it also does say if there's available off-street parking that's open to the public, then they can utilize that.
I mean, if we're gonna, talk about, let's say, the noise, the hours of, quiet time. And we're, as Chair Lynn said, if we have, it should be, what everyone else has. Why are we singling these folks out? So basically you could have a neighbor, and you got 200 people at his house and everything's fine. Yet if you have, one of these, vacation rentals, you can't. So, I mean, again, it's, you're setting a double standard, for folks. I mean, to me, it's kind of a moot point, having a calculation of how many people can show up at a particular place. I mean, how about if it's out in the middle of nowhere, right? I mean, let's say you don't have a lot of neighbors. Let's say you're down South Point Road, right? And you have, all the land in the world. And you have one of these and you have a big rip roaring party. So, I mean, to me, that's, just more overregulation.
I think what this bill is trying to do again is to bring balance. In the past, a lot of times complaints that come in regarding gatherings are just that. They're large gatherings. There's a lot of activity going on. And normally it's connected to some sort of consistent event like weddings on a regular basis. And so we'll get called, we'll go out and do an investigation. We find that they're advertising for weddings. This isn't something that the homeowner is doing as they're allowed to do as part of their, having their daughter married there or something. This is a commercial operation and the neighbors call because they're affected by it. It's happening on a regular basis. So again, this is trying to find that balance to say you cannot do that, but to also say you can, but be able to be aware of the neighbors and to allow there to be some, balance with both sides of it. It's not easy, and I think they're just trying to find that middle ground.
Yeah, I get that, but I mean, at the same time, to have a formula, maybe something has to be written in there, regarding large events like weddings. I mean, let's say if you have your Ohana over from Oahu, and, you're having a, whatever, graduation party, might be a one-off thing, right? I can understand that if they're using that commercially for weddings or events on a regular basis, that's different than regulating everyone the same. So there has to be some language in there, I think, that differentiates between what gathering is and what events are.
Yeah, and
I think that same language applies to instructional stuff, right? Because I think there was language in here to talk about, like, if somebody was doing yoga, so what do you consider as, I'm teaching my daughter how to do yoga versus I'm teaching somebody who paid for a class to do yoga.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know how many yoga sessions are gonna get very raucous.
so they did,
I mean,
they did attempt to define event and gathering within the bill. So they're trying to bring clarity to those types of matters.
yeah, I think that needs more work.
I think when it comes down to the events or the gatherings, it really depends if it's owner hosted or operator hosted. I think if we're gonna go back and have it amended to where it owner hosted doesn't have to comply to this, you really can't tell an owner what they can do on their private property, and that's just the government overreaching their boundary. And as an owner, if you're planning on hosting a large event, you as an owner should maybe go talk to with your neighbors and say, hey, I'm having an event, come over for lunch. Can we borrow the parking in front of your house? Have that relationship, that good neighbor attribute. Um, I I think this bill needs to go back to the table, and anything in regards to owner hosted just has to be retracted. And there needs to just be a little more clarification and requirements asked of those that are operator hosted or unhosted.
And just to clarify, when we do finally draft this, the final version of this, we're looking at an unfavorable recommendation with the reasons for the denial. So we're not talking about recommendations anymore. It's the reasons for the denial. If you have recommendations for how the bill could be changed, then we have to talk about a different bill, a bill to approve with recommendations as to how it could be changed so that you could approve it. Right now, if you're looking at an unfavorable recommendation, what you're articulating are the reasons for denying for the unfavorable recommendation.
So to sum that up, so reasons why this is passing with an unfavorable is because of the language
and
with
yeah,
an underline on the
owner hosted.
owner hosted. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. So our intention is that this is an unfavorable recommendation, and these are reasons why we think this bill needs to go back, and why we're giving the unfavorable is because of these listed reasons and recommendations, is that it doesn't make sense to us. I also see, here, I think it's just a housekeeping item here, but the planning director's recommendation is for 30 days, but then under the section under property tax, it says 180 days for the entire year. So I don't know if that's, I don't know. I mean, this is a property tax issue, but I also think that this shouldn't apply to owner hosted. This property tax classification where you lose your homeowner tax classification because you're still living in the home. Yeah, we don't control that, but that's also one of the reasons why I think this bill has to go back, because it's unfair to those who actually live on their property that they're not going to lose their homeowner exemption because they rented out their house, a room in their house for 2 days.
Or you have children who become of age and turn into renters.
Or you have friends that come over and say, I want to rent. Hey, I'm coming to Big Island. I want to stay for a couple of days. Can I pay you, to stay in your house. I mean, a lot of people do that, because you don't want to be a bum, right? But I think that section there, the homeowner exemption, I'd like to have that exempted for owner hosted. And sorry, Tracy, I do appreciate all the work that you've put into this bill and the planning department. But this is just part of our process that we have to go through it. Nothing against you guys personally. Okay, so I want to talk about enforcement. How would this get enforced is my question, because maybe planning department, you can explain how it's currently enforced. So if somebody files a complaint with the planning department that there's a short-term vacation rental that's not in compliance, how does that go right now?
So there's two different areas that we deal with. We don't get a whole lot of calls for STVRs that are registered that are not in compliance. Occasionally, we will get a call saying, oh, this STVR had a loud party the other night. And so our inspector will send a letter to them reminding them of the good neighbor policy, which talks about noise and hours, as far as nighttime and stuff like that. Majority of the complaints that come in are this person is operating an illegal STVR, right? Bill 108 has a section, because that's what we're currently following is and basically, we have the ability to go online and look at advertising. And if their advertising is a short-term vacation rental, then the inspectors have the ability at that point to use that as evidence of operation. But as mentioned at the Leeward Planning Commission, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 6 months ago, we're trying to be more cognizant of the communication between the complainant and the department. And because sometimes we'll go through a whole process and the complainant won't know what the status is of what's going on with their complaint. So we've started doing a courtesy letter and where we send it out to the, proposed or alleged operator, and we BCC, blind copy, the complainant, letting them know, hey, we've received a complaint that you're operating an illegal SDVR. And we give them a period of time to respond. And we even put information in there about the advertising, right? And so they'll respond accordingly, and we set up a site inspection and we'll try to go out. Sometimes a site inspection is not needed because of the fact that the evidence is pretty clear just through the advertising. Normally, it resolves. Either they have the ability to get registered and we work with them to get registered, or they don't. And if they don't have the ability and they continue, then that's where we have to issue the violation. And sometimes we'll go to Board of Appeals. Sometimes they'll stop what they're doing. Again, there's a lot of the complaints we get are they're not actually STVRs, they're hosted rentals, right? They're actually, someone's living there, they're renting, and so the inspectors will do that. The difficulty going forward with this bill is the hosting platforms. The hosting platforms are now going to be kind of like the ones, like the gatekeepers or whatever. You have to have a number as part of this bill to be able to be advertised on those platforms. So you'll have to have an STVR number or whatever we're going to call these new numbers. Additionally, we're even getting calls now from the platforms from other types of units, and we're going to have to work this out, like timeshares, right? They're saying you don't have a number, and it's like, okay, we gotta figure that one out because they're legally operating as timeshares. So we may end up having to create a system where we probably will have to let the platforms know that, look, if they're timeshares, they're okay. They're not falling under Bill 108 or this current bill 121. Hopefully that answers your question, but I mean, a lot of times it's, we get a complaint, we type in the information, or even the complainant will send us the advertising of them operating. Sometimes they're on VRBO or Airbnb. Sometimes they're doing it themselves, or they're on Facebook or somewhere, or they have some obscure website that is doing it.
Thank you, Director Darrell. I guess my question is like, say if you've already issued the notice of violation and your inspectors have already gone out, they've done all they could, and this is somebody who's a operator hosted or a platform hosted TAR. And you say, okay, we're gonna fine you $10,000, I don't know, is it per day or whatever? But the person says, fine, we'll pay it. What happens then? How do you make sure that those people who are continuing to be in non-compliance and not following the law get punished? Does the county then, foreclose or do eminent domain take their house because they haven't, I don't know. That's kind of my thought process, because I'm just thinking outside the box here that some properties may have the means to just continue to stay in non-compliance, and they're gonna continue to operate like that because they just have the money to pay the fines.
Well, that brings up a good point, Chair Lynn, and that is that it seems like throughout the testimony, we've heard this figure of $10,000 a day. That's not that the $10,000 a day first time violation is actually to the hosting platforms, right? If you look at the actual violation schedule for them, the first I think was 2,500, then 5,000, and then 10,000 so. But also what happens, so initially, let's say we get a violation, and again, I don't recall not one, and I could be wrong, there could be one or two out there, but these aren't registered STVRs we're normally dealing with. We're dealing with ones that aren't registered. So let's use that as an example. So somebody's operating, maybe they have a big house, maybe they make $10,000 a day, in monies coming in from their patrons, and we get a complaint that they're illegal, they're not registered. So again, we'll do our process, we'll send out a courtesy letter, wait for a period of time for a response. If we get a response and work with them, we go out for a site inspection. If we find that yes, this is valid, and they don't stop, then we issue the notice of violation. That'll come with the fine. And then after 30 days, if they don't resolve the order, then the daily finds it. The way this works with the understanding of what you're bringing up is that this will be a fine of double what they're advertising per day. So that way it is hitting them to where they say, I can't continue to operate like this. I have to stop, right? And it, again, most times that's not the case. They want to try to work it out. There also is the option that they can appeal the planning department, and we go to the Board of Appeals and try to go through that process. If it gets to the point that we just can't resolve, then we send all of our information up to our corporation counsel, and then they will take it as far as they can legally. Sometimes they have to take it to court, and a judge will make a determination at that point. So I don't recall there ever being one, obviously, where we've, gotten a lien for a house or anything like that. I recall once, I mean, probably over 2 decades ago, where there was another type of violation for a junkyard, and the person just didn't do anything. And so they put a lien on that property. So whoever was, if they were going to sell it or if someone was going to buy it, they were going to have to resolve that issue. But we're, that's normally not anywhere near the case.
Thank you, Director Darrow. Yeah, I just wanted clarification with that, because if we can't properly enforce it, why create this, regulation? And to follow up with that is, based off of the number that you provided earlier with around 4,000 registered short-term vacation rentals, and if you charge the current fee schedule there, how many more staff would you actually be able to hire? Because you would have to hire more people to enforce this code.
So again, that brings up another point, and I'm not sure if we're going to have to adjust the terminology in here. It says enforcement account, right? It's not just an enforcement account. There's registrations that come in. If there is monies from an enforcement action, that'll go in there. But right now, if that was the case, we wouldn't be able to, maintain, because we don't make much money from enforcement for SDVRs. It mainly comes in from registrations and those types of things. So it is meant to administer the program. My understanding is they're looking at, Tracy, was it 10 positions? 8?
I
8
believe it's approximately 8 right now.
8 positions. So that is going to include both East and West Hawaii, additional enforcement that's focused on SDVRs or hosted, unhosted, planner, and clerks. Because when we went through this, and I mentioned this at Leeward, when planning department had to register those in Bill 108, literally for 1 year, we had almost a majority of our staff working overtime on the weekends just to be able to get through the stack of applications and registrations that came in. And we anticipate the same thing happening again. And so we want to be able to bring on additional staff to be able to take care of that. Also, lesson learned, we're going to try to, make it so it doesn't happen all at once. We kind of, as Heather said, if this passes, they can operate until, they can submit their application. They can operate until their application is taken care of. So we're going to kind of stagger the process to be able to work it through.
Also, I believe Assistant Tax Administrator from the Real Property Tax Office is available on Zoom to answer your initial tax question.
Oh, okay.
And that would be Kelta Joe. Kata Joe.
Okay. Okay. Hello, thank you for
Hello.
signing on. We just wanted to get some clarification on the impact of this Bill 121 in terms of property tax and the homeowner exemption portion. Currently, how much of the Bill 108 monies that you guys get, how does that fall into the property tax bucket?
As far as real property tax, there really is no amount per se because, truth be told, our chapter 19, prohibits properties that are transient accommodations from receiving a homeowner's tax class. And so these are for properties that are primary residences. So we've always held to the fact that if a property has a transient accommodation that is hosted, they would not get a preferential tax benefit associated with that homeowner's tax class. So there really is no, I guess, mechanism to quantify that for you because it's something we've always done.
So then what classification do they fall under and what does that tax bracket look like?
Yeah, so for example, the typical tax classification for the properties would be a residential tax class, which is assessed at $11.10 per $1,000 of assessed value. For individuals who are not doing any kind of transit accommodations, they would be able to get the homeowner's tax rate, which is $6.15 per thousand. So that's usually the largest distinction in terms of cost to individuals who decide to do a transit accommodation in their primary residence.
Okay, so you're saying if somebody registers under the proposed TAR bill and their amnesty period has closed, then they would have to pay $5 more per $1,000 valuation of their property.
Correct. And then just to clarify, they would still receive, there's two components to a primary residence benefit with the real property tax division. One is the tax classification that I just talked about. The other is a homeowner's exemption, and that is an amount that's tied to individual's age and the value of their property. They would still continue to receive that benefit in terms of the actual exemption amount that would take off their would reduce their net taxable value.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Commissioners, had any other questions for real property tax? Yeah, go ahead.
So Kata, just for clarification for everyone, regardless of this bill, your real property has been doing this for as long as you can remember, correct?
That's correct. And the reason for it is because we're giving this preferential tax rate. The intent of that rate was always for individuals who carved out their homes specifically and only for their primary residence. And so that's why we've always had this carve out to separate and make that distinction between tax rates.
Thank you. And I think that brings me back to that point is if it's primary residence, you're living in the home, then you shouldn't have to lose your homeowner exemption. That's kind of my thought process there. I mean, but thank you, Real Property Tax, for your commentary and your answers. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So Chair Lynn, on that point, it isn't going to be, I'm sure you're probably aware, it isn't going to be in this bill to make that change.
Yeah.
That's in chapter 19 of the county code in regards to that. So just to kind of reiterate, when, we've had people come to the planning department, they've come in, they've gotten a use permit for a bed and breakfast operation, and they find out later that, oh, their taxes went up. And then they come to find out that because of the commercial use or renting out or receiving monies for whatever it is, long-term, short-term, they end up losing a certain amount of exemptions on their taxes. So this has kind of been going on for as long as I can recall.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Vice
Yeah,
Chair.
this is, I think, for staff. You guys are talking about having to hire more people to regulate this. What's the, you guys fully staffed at the planning department right now?
We're currently, my understanding, we're 25% short. And that's not from the lack of trying. It's just been very difficult to have people come in and apply, as well as getting qualified staff to apply.
So don't you think that's going to be a burden to your department, having to deal with this?
Well, we have other things coming our way as well. We just got to roll with the punches.
I mean, is my comment on that is just because we already have so many other things going on, and we should be focusing on to help support housing production in terms of zoning and subdivisions and all that kind of stuff. I just feel like providing staff for this just takes away what could be used for doing those kind of activities. And I don't agree with the statement in this bill or the information that was provided to us saying that this would help alleviate the housing supply. I don't think that is correct. Because even if you had somebody register and they have always used it as a STVR, what does registering it do to increase the housing supply? I mean, it's not like if you sell it, the person sees it as, hey, it was a great thing for a rental business. I'm just gonna stick to continuing as a rental business. And I don't think it changes that supply and demand.
No, not at all. I don't think it has any bearing on supply and demand. And if this is the motivation behind this, then it's ill thought. It's, again, you're trying to dump the responsibility on, the public. I mean, that's a state and county problem. You don't have enough housing. Well, why? You got to go look at why. What is the reason for that? And, it's the overregulation. It's very difficult to, I mean, how long does it take to get a building permit now? A year?
It depends.
I mean, we're building a warehouse down at the mill right now. We've been dealing with this for 2 years, trying to get a warehouse up. And they're just pouring the slab today. And I bought the thing 2 years ago, and this is how long it's taken to get us to this point.
Okay, yeah, so Commissioner Deleuze?
Yeah, Chair, no, I think the intent is to manage the impact of TARs. That's really what we're talking about.
Mhm.
And looking at it from the standpoint of, on the other side of it is, to control this, as the deputy has said earlier, right, is to make them legal. That's fine, but put them in certain areas. And that's the biggest complaint I get from people is, there's one next door, there's one down the street. I don't think I think the issue of homelessness is maybe more addressed in Bill 123, trying to help out with adding ADUs to the units. So, but my main comment was when you're talking about property tax, because believe me, I've fought them many times. And it's intended to be fair. Don't forget that's the bulk of their revenue to run the county. So I've seen big fights over all kind of issues on trying to get changes. I just think that if we go forward with some of these changes, those are more the primary, that's maybe a secondary. You know, it's obvious that people who do this, do it for a living. So that's what their basis will, of what they'll argue on. So I just want to see if we can move forward with it. But this really is about managing the TARs.
No, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Deleuze. And it's not that we're against regulating, it's how we regulate and what the conditions and the requirements are is my personal concern. Because if you look on Airbnb, I'm sure I can find a lot of vacation rentals available. But for those people who are using their own property and living in it, I don't think that should apply. That's my first thing. I do think that we do need different sources of income for the county. But I just don't think the way that this bill is written has been fully fleshed out in the way that would benefit everyone. So I think we can, beat this thing to death here. I'm okay with the list of issues and recommendations that I've provided so far. Unless other commissioners have anything else to add. But I think this would be a good starting point for the council to consider going forward and in their deliberation of the Bill 121. Because ultimately, we still aren't the decision makers here. They are, but at least we can provide them with at least our concerns and our talking points here. And I appreciate Planning Director Darrell for explaining the enforcement part for the record so that that's there for them to deliberate as well. So with that, I yield. Any more comments from me, but if any other commissioners have anything else.
Just clarification, Chair. So, motion is being made, on favorable recommendation. I got about 6 bullet points. Maybe if you can recap.
Yeah,
If you don't
so
mind.
I think
Thank you.
Council, would you be able to help recap the?
Yeah, I'd like to ensure that the notes that I have are accurate and that they accurately reflect the desire of the commission. I have, based on the discussion, your motion for an unfavorable recommendation to council for Bill 121, based on the following reasons. One of the following reasons, the first stated, was that you wanted to have an economic impact analysis of the bill. Is that correct?
Correct.
Second, you want the owner hosted rental, all provisions related to owner hosted rentals removed from the bill.
Correct.
Correct.
Third, you wanted to delete the noise requirements.
Correct.
Yes, with and make it in line with current county.
The current county already apply,
Okay.
7 to 10.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
then.
So
Any
yeah. So then
residential property.
yeah, we would strike that out completely.
And then the next was, there was a question about ag, but given the explanation by Deputy Director Darrow, I believe you had yielded because we cannot propose anything that conflicts with
The state.
HRS.
Yeah.
Just before that was changing.
Oh, Dirk, if you could turn on your mic, please.
Sorry about that. There was also the recommendation to consider changing affidavit to declaration,
And the only reason I didn't include that was that this is
like a recommendation.
it's a recommendation and not a reason for the denial. It was noted in the discussion that the commission was favorably inclined towards that, the planning director's recommendation. Okay, the next was the gathering size provisions. that one of the reasons for the denial was a disagreement with the gathering size provisions as an example of government overreach. It's not clear if that provision, if your concern was related only to owner hosted or to other forms of GAR.
Again, I think keeping in line, owner hosted.
But if all provisions related to owner hosted are removed from the bill, then it wouldn't be relevant. It would be, that would be
Oh.
moot.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry,
That's what I
sorry,
have.
can you repeat that last statement? You said something about the gathering. I didn't hear it.
There was a discussion, a lengthy discussion on gathering size. But I wanted to clarify whether that applied to operator hosted, and the discussion we had did not apply to operator hosted.
Tracy, you had something?
Just to add one more, I think there was a discussion on how the ADU should be considered for transient
Yes,
accommodation
yes,
rentals.
yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's all I have.
Okay. So that is the motion on the floor, is to forward a unfavorable recommendation for Bill 121 based on stated reasons that was just explained. Any further discussion on this motion? If not, I will call for a roll call vote on this motion.
Okay. Commissioner Parent? The motion is an unfavorable recommendation with the statements articulated and reasons for the denial.
Yes, on the unfavorable motion.
Vice Chair Daniele,
Aye.
Commissioner Deleuze,
Nay.
Chair Lynn.
Aye.
The motion does not carry 3-1.
So with that, because the commission has not been able to make a decision on this bill, it goes forward with the unfavorable recommendation by default. Okay, so I think that's all we have for Bill 121. Thank you, commissioners. We will now move on to Bill 122, which is agenda item number 6, Initiator County Council PL-CCI 2024-00004. Bill 122, an ordinance amending Chapter 25 and Chapter 14 of Article 4, Section 14-20 of the Hawaii County Code 1983, 2016 edition, as amended, relating to the repeal of bed and breakfasts as a permitted use, repeal all provisions that allow for bed and breakfast establishments. Okay, we will start with staff presentation by Tracy.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Windward Planning Commission. Before you today, we have Bill 122 related to the repeal of bed and breakfast as a permitted use. So the county council has referred Bill 122 to the planning director and the Windward and Leeward Planning Commissions for comment and recommendations. The purpose of this amendment is to repeal all zoning code provisions for bed and breakfast establishments, also known as B&Bs, as they will be regulated as either an owner-hosted or operator-hosted transient accommodation rental, should the county council initiated Bill 121 transient accommodation rentals be adopted. So what is a B&B? A B&B is currently defined as any single-family dwelling and/or guest house pursuant to Hawaii County Code Section 25-4-9, which have been permitted on a building site in which overnight accommodations and only breakfast meals are provided to a maximum of 10 guests for compensation for periods of less than 30 days. The B&B establishment shall be subordinate and clearly incidental to the principal use as a residence by its operator and not alter or be detrimental to the character of the surrounding area. The operator of a B&B establishment shall also reside on the same building site as that being used for the B&B establishment. So where are B&Bs permitted? Currently, B&Bs are permitted as an outright use within the double family residential zoning district, multiple family residential zoning district, residential commercial mixed use district, the resort hotel zoning district, the neighborhood commercial zoning district, general commercial zoning district, village commercial zoning district, and the downtown Hilo commercial zoning district. In addition, B&Bs are also permitted in the following zoning districts as long as a use permit is obtained if the subject parcel is located within the state land use urban district, and a special permit is obtained if the subject parcel is located within the state land use rural and agricultural districts. Those districts include the single family residential zoning district, the residential and agricultural zoning district, the family agricultural zoning district, and the agricultural zoning district. So the proposed amendments to Hawaii County Code Chapter 25 include repealing the current definition of bed and breakfast establishments, repeals the need to secure a use permit for a B&B establishment in the RS, RA, FA, and A zoning districts within the state land use urban districts, and also repeals the entire section relating to B&B establishments and the standards and requirements for B&B establishments, which is currently found in Section 25-4-7 of the Hawaii County Code. It also repeals the parking requirements for B&B establishments. In addition to changes being proposed in Hawaii County Code Chapter 25, we also have proposed amendments to Hawaii County Code Chapter 14, the General Welfare Chapter. And that includes amending the definition of hotel to delete the language of bed and breakfast establishments and to further define hotel as just a transient accommodation rental. So with that, the planning director is recommending that the planning commission send a favorable recommendation of Bill 122 to the county council with the following suggested revisions. So the first revision is that under Section 7 of the draft bill, please consider changing the proposed definition of hotel to match the definition of hotel that is already placed and found in Chapter 25, which currently states that a building or group of buildings containing 6 or more rooms or suites, which provides transient lodging accommodations, meals, entertainment, and various personal services for compensation, whether such establishment is called a hotel, motel, motor hotel, motor lodge, inn, or otherwise. The reason for this is that definitions are important because most definitions embody the law. Therefore, if there are 2 definitions of hotel that are found within our Hawaii County Code, then there's no clear guidance regarding how a hotel is to be understood and or regulated. The next recommendation is that we recommended adding language in Bill 121, the Transient Accommodation Bill, that would allow for the continued operation of existing bed and breakfast establishments that were permitted by a special permit or a use permit prior to the adoption of Bill 121. The planning director is recommending that there be language added so that it would allow for the continued operation of the existing B&Bs per the conditions of the use permit or special permit and the good neighbor standards proposed in Bill 121. With that, the next step, so the Windward and Leeward Planning Commissions are required to take action on Bill 122 and transmit it to Council by May 29, 2024. The commissions again may recommend approval of all, some, or none of the director's suggested recommendations. The commissions may also recommend their own revisions to the bill, Once Bill 122 alongside Bill 121 and 123 is heard before the Windward and Leeward Planning Commission, the recommendations will be sent back to the County Council's Policy Committee on Planning, Land Use and Development, where the bills will then be forwarded with a recommendation to Council. At Council, the bills will need to go through the first and second final reading in order to be passed as an ordinance. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Tracy. Commissioners, questions for staff or the planning department? So I guess my question would be to the staff is this would be considered a owner or operator hosted if the Bill 121 language is adopted. Right?
What,
As a B and B, right? A B and B would be then considered a owner hosted or a operator hosted.
right now, the way that a bed and breakfast is defined is it can be an owner or operator. So it can be either one.
Okay,
So it would apply to both, but basically what we're saying is because we're gonna have owner hosted and operator hosted, there's no sense to have a bed and breakfast because they're almost identical. That's all it's doing.
Okay.
The other thing is the process of bed and breakfast, except for the areas that you saw that it was listed as permitted. In residential and agricultural zones, it requires going through planning commission to get approved. Whereas owner operated, owner hosted and operator hosted would be permitted.
okay. But the distinction is that right here, that a B and B could be in an agricultural zoning district. Whereas how Bill 121's language says that it cannot.
The same would apply for a bed and breakfast, in the sense that if, and this has happened on a number of times, operator, see, the main thing is complying with the requirements of chapter 205 for agriculture, farming, right? So if you only have one dwelling on the property, then basically the owner or operator is responsible for that requirement of farming, right? And so they can do their farming and they can host a B&B. And so the jurisdiction right there is, normally it's within the county's jurisdiction to approve that or deny that special permit. Now, if they came in and say they wanted to do the bed and breakfast in the additional farm dwelling, we would recommend denial for that, or we would recommend that you do not pass that. What's happened in the past when there has been two dwellings is we've asked them to redesignate. And what that means is so that the owner or operator lives in the additional farm dwelling and complies with the requirements of that, and they host the first farm dwelling. So that, again, chapter 205, the requirements are done.
Okay, maybe there's a little confusion for me because how I read it is that your current definition of B and Bs allow for a B and B to be used in an agricultural district with a special permit.
Correct.
But if you remove the B and B language from the code and you're only applying it as a owner or operator hosted, then you don't get the opportunity to apply for a special use permit, and therefore you do not get to be a B and B anymore.
You wouldn't need to, because as mentioned, the owner or operator that's doing the hosted would be the one responsible. There's somebody living on site that's responsible for the agricultural requirements. That was the problem that occurred in Bill 108 with the unhosted. there was nobody living on site that could comply with the requirements of Chapter 205. And that's why they're in court right now. Because they're saying we should be able to do this. We should be able to rent our home out. But the issue is you're not complying with the requirements of Chapter 205. Whereas if there's somebody living on site, they will comply with the requirements.
I think by definition, Chair, the way I understand it is that on ag land, you just can't rent your pasture. That's basically it. You've got to be able to prove that you use the land for ag. Or I take it back. That's not necessarily true, but it's got to be hosted. And I think, hosted and, owner, owner occupied in this case, owner hosting, right? As well as having an operator hosted. And I think that's what, Jeff was trying to explain. So I know everybody thinks no, TARs on ag land, but what he's saying, no, you can still have it. Cause like a lot of our properties are on ag land, HPP, HOVE, right? So it's still possible to have it. This is more of a language cleanup, I think, based on 121 is the way I see it. Yeah.
It's a matter of terminology,
you.
right? A B&B now has become a hosted rental is what it is. They're pretty much the same.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner? Okay, I do see that there's one testifier here. So if Jennifer Wilkinson can please come up. Could you please raise your right hand? You swear or affirm to tell the truth on this matter, not before the Windward Planning Commission? Okay, please state your name and the town you reside in, and you have 3 minutes.
Jennifer Wilkinson, and I reside in Kona. And I just have comments. I'm not a bed and breakfast owner, but and all due respect, I know that I think this came out of trying to make things easier because it's quite a chore to apply for and be granted the special permit. I did want to point out, though, that runs with the land. You don't have to reapply every year and renew, and you're not under the same rules as a regular TAR would be necessarily. So you're not subject to a complaining neighbor that's going to be able to shut you down when you have 1 or 2 complaints for a loud weekend. So there's a bit of a private property right that you get with that special permit that you would not then have with the new bill. So I just wanted to point that out and ask you to consider that and as someone who has visited bed and breakfasts, they're not the same. The owner is usually there on site. I've never been there when it's an operator, but the owner takes special care in being there and sharing and providing, and it's quite different, I think, the experience. And so for someone to want to go through all that effort to get the special permit to have that bed and breakfast, I think the reward is that you get to be a bed and breakfast and carry that through and not have to be subject to the annual renewals and the other minutia that comes up with a TAR. So that's it. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Maybe if staff or planning director, if you could expand on that requirement that she's talking about, the testifier is talking about for annual registration. Because I think that's kind of unclear in what the application has right now, but what condition or what requirements does a bed and breakfast have compared to what we're proposing in Bill 121?
So she is correct. They're currently in a bed and breakfast, whether you come in through a use permit in residential or as a special permit in agricultural zone lands. There's no yearly requirement to pay a fee. It's basically the cost of the application, and if you hire somebody or do it yourself and go through the planning commission. The permit does run with the land. So if they end up, selling the property and the new owner wants to continue, they can. They have to comply with the conditions. One thing I would say, though, that a bed and breakfast operation is still under certain requirements to, be considerate. If we get complaints regarding activities from even a B&B that's approved through a permit, and we find those to be valid, we can bring it back to the commission. And there has been extreme cases where that has come close. I don't recall if we ever actually did it, but it's come close. But normally, we don't get complaints from, again, we normally don't get complaints from people that are registered, that are operating. It's the ones that people are saying are not registered, not legal. They're kind of just, and a lot of times we'll find that there's other things going on as well, like unpermitted structures and all kinds of things going on. But that is, again, it sounds like one of the concerns of the commission is these costs, right? So that could be a consideration to also recommend, like, hey, those fees sound, kind of high. Any way we can bring them down, or,
Thank you, Director Darrell. But my thought is just that if I just compare the process to get a special use permit versus an annual registration for a owner hosted or a operator hosted property, which one is easier? We just made it easier for people to do B&Bs, I think, if you go with that route, but it doesn't stick with the land. And I guess I'm just thinking from that person's perspective. If they own the B&B, it's like, well, I spent all this money to get a special use permit. I get to keep it forever. Whereas now I have to go and register every year. I have to provide all this information. And maybe I'm just thinking out loud, but I feel like Bill 121 just makes it easier for people to get B&Bs, but they don't get the same benefits as if they went through a special use permit. If you catch the direction I'm going.
Maybe clarification.
Yeah.
Are the current special use permit people grandfathered in?
They would be under 121, based on my understanding is that,
So they still would still have the same.
right, but it's just whoever going forward, they no longer can have that same privilege of being a B&B and still have it forever.
But it's easier.
I know, I'm
It's easier
trying
for
to,
them.
I'm just trying to put that through my brain and process.
well, I don't think, I think we're clear. It's more difficult to get a special permit or a use permit than to get a hosted, register as a host. It's more costly to pay a yearly fee for the hosted or operator than it is to, once you go through that process with the B&B, you're done, you're okay. It's there. So there's that.
I'm just trying to weigh the things in my mind, but
And this has come out quite a bit in testimony,
Yeah.
The numbers, they seem, like some people feel it's high. So again, those are considerations.
okay, thank you. Any other commissioners have any comments or questions? If not, is there a motion for action on this agenda item?
Chair, I would just point out there is a Zoom testifier
Oh,
still to
okay,
speak.
sorry. Sorry, please go ahead and turn on your mic and your video, please.
Aloha, Commissioners.
Hi, if you could please raise your right hand and I'll swear you in.
Yes,
Okay, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth on this matter now before the Windward Planning Commission?
yes, I do.
Okay, please state your name, the town you reside in, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Janice Palmaglenny, and I live in Kailua Kona. And I'm speaking to Bill 122. It's clear that most of the people who came out against the STVR bills and stronger, more fair regulation are either realtors or people who have or plan to have a vacation rental. The bills have been misinterpreted by testifiers and the general public, largely because of the fear created by hyper misleading and even patently false information being fed to them by the real estate industry. And industry people or their AI have, in fact, written many of the testimonies you've heard and read on this matter as they offer to do that for them. The bed and breakfast bill has been used as a lightning rod to stir people up against any vacation rental regulation. The fact that the same activity would be renamed and categorized differently wasn't even noted in industry PR. All I heard in testimony and from people on the street has been that you will never be able to go to a B&B again because they won't exist. And when I tried to direct people to read the actual bill, they didn't want to. And why? Because once people are caught by the propaganda bug, even if it might be wrong, they often can't or don't want to escape, especially when it has to do with making money. My number one concern with this bill and all STVRs, including bed and breakfast, is that they all need to be owner hosted in areas other than resort and commercial. That's why there aren't as many complaints for those rentals. Sure, the owners can have someone hosting on their day off, but managers work for the people who pay them and they do what they're paid to do. That's what they care about, not the neighbors and not the law. One issue with bed and breakfast being recategorized is that not just they, but all hosted permitted STVRs might be given permanent permitting. If I'm reading that incorrectly, I apologize. But no STVR should be given a permit that runs with the land, and every STVR owner should be required to renew their permit just like a driver's license, but more often. And any establishment that has complaints and has been found to break a county law more than once should pay hefty fines and or lose the permit in order to discourage them and others to stop breaking the law that are meant to protect neighbors and community. Again, like a driver's license. Neither driving or owning a vacation rental or entitlements and STVRs are money-making commercial enterprises. Whatever the name, bed and breakfast can serve a lovely purpose in our communities and as a travel option, but only in the manner in which traditional B&Bs, not Airbnb, is run. Traditional bed and breakfasts are establishments known for bringing people in direct communal contact with resident homeowners who welcome them into their lives and their homes. They're not meant to be restaurants or hotel stand-ins with overworked, often uncaring managers. I suggest keeping bed and breakfasts in their own category with their old
30
name and rules.
seconds.
I suggest keeping bed and breakfasts in their own category with their own name and rules, including being owner hosted, while letting the permit run with the land in order to avoid confusion and to keep the tradition alive. And no matter what they're called, STVR regulation has to be backed by clear, well-funded enforcement. Otherwise, Bill 122 and any other STVR regulation aren't worth discussing, no less made into law. Mahalo for listening to my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, commissioners, any other questions for staff? Okay, is there a motion for action on this item?
Chair.
No, go ahead.
I did want to bring up another issue that came up with Janice that jogged my memory is that there's a reason why the operator hosted is only for a period of time. In fact, I think that time has passed, correct? You have to have been operating already to be able to get the non-conforming use certificate, right?
Correct. And that's for the zoning districts that are not listed as permitted
Correct.
districts in that section.
So the concern was, and I think that is another concern that was brought up with the B&B, is that when this bill was coming up, the hosted bill, people were concerned that the people that were buying houses and doing unhosted were going to hire somebody to operate their hosted rental, right? But it would not be an owner operated hosted. It would be an operator hosted. And so that was a concern that was brought up. And that's why a B&B still has that possibility, but it's always had it. That's always been in the B&B code. Owner operator can host that. And we haven't seen that proliferation of, people buying houses just to do bed and breakfast or operator hosted. But again, I just wanted to bring that up. That was an issue that was concerning to certain people.
Thank you, Director. And based off of what I read, people could still call their operator hosted or owner hosted a B and B under that new bill? No,
No,
no, they can't call it a B and B?
so the way this bill 122, it completely repeals B&Bs. However, in 121, we did provide the recommendation with the provisions for existing B&Bs.
So they can still be called B and B and advertised as a B and B. But nobody else can be advertise themselves as a B and B.
Correct, if these bills should pass.
Okay, thank you. So the request still stands. Is there a motion for action on this agenda item?
Chair, I move that a favorable recommendation forwarded to the county council on bill number 122, docket number PL-CCI-2024-000004. Based on the planned recommendations, it shall be adopted.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Deleuze for a favorable recommendation. Is there a second on that motion? I'll second it, just so we can have discussion. Okay, so discussion. What do commissioners think? I think
I
I've
mean,
shared enough of my thoughts.
yeah.
so. Other commissioners.
I mean, I get it's striking the language and, because it's almost the same. I say almost. I think that B and B has a certain connotation, that people come to expect something different from a B and B than maybe a short-term vacation. I would like to see something in there that would keep the language of being able to call it a B and B. Why would we want to remove that? To me, that just seems strange. I mean, I get it that a lot of it's redundant to 121, but I still think that there's an essence there of what a B and B is that does not get captured in anything else. So that's about the only thing that I can say. And why can't they call it a B and B? Why? I mean, if we're just talking semantics, then let them call it a B and B if they want.
Is that a question for your planning department?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, the question is, why can't they call it a B and B?
So typically, should a use get repealed or not be located in our zoning code, planners typically don't like to address those uses because they're not considered permitted uses in our zoning code. So, ADUs are currently, we consider them ohanas or additional farm buildings. So I actually, when I speak to the public, I always be sure to correctly address the zoning code because that's our authority. As you can see in Bill 123 in the following discussion, there's that change that's going to be changing it. So we're going to have to change the way we speak to the public and address that. Typically, if bed and breakfasts do get repealed, staff will have to be under the understanding that as of a certain date, B&Bs were no longer in the code. And now it's, going to be an operator hosted or owner hosted should these bills pass as written.
So what happens if somebody does advertise as a B and B? What is the mechanism? Does somebody have to just say they registered their business as a operator hosted business and they call it, Dennis Lin B&B. Do I now have to go back to all these different things and change my name because I can't advertise as the B&B?
I think, you know, if the concern is the label, I think a recommendation going up saying we would like to keep bed and breakfast as part of the terminology, right? I think what they're trying to do is not have two processes for the same thing, right? So believe me, we've seen people advertise as every kind of thing imaginable. And there are many people that are B&Bs that do not serve breakfast. So it's like, why are you calling yourself a B&B when you don't serve breakfast? So, I mean, again, if that's the issue, that would be a good recommendation going up.
So Commissioner Daniele, would you consider making that recommendation? Oh, was it?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Deleuze, would that be something that you would consider, just the label of B&B to continue, but the process in which it operates would fall under the proposed language in Bill 121?
No, I wouldn't oppose. I think in concept, as Deputy Director had said, is I think the intent of the bill is really a partial cleanup, but also to make it easier. I'm okay with that. I think it's just terminology. I'm okay.
Okay, so you're okay with amending your motion to include that labeling of B&B?
That's fine.
Okay,
I'll let you make the amendment.
okay,
It could be as simple as in the bill, just saying that a hosted rental could use identification or advertising as a bed and breakfast or something. I mean, we don't need to make a big thing out of it, just a simple advertising tool.
okay. So I'll repeat the motion. The motion is a favorable recommendation be forwarded to the County Council on Bill 122, based on the Planning Director's recommendation, and include that the labeling of bed and breakfast or B&B be included for future use with no changes in the process as stated in Bill 121. Okay,
So I gotta throw a wrench in this. Sorry.
okay,
So keep in mind, we're going with an unfavorable up on 121.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're asking is that in your hosted and your owner and
Mhm.
operator hosted, you allow this terminology. But if that doesn't pass, then basically we have to consider we're back at square one with B&B. And so we'll have to see how that goes, but hopefully they'll take all of that into consideration.
all right. Commissioners, you okay with that? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Okay. Commissioner Deleuze,
I
Commissioner Daniele,
aye.
Commissioner Perrin,
Aye.
and Chair Lin.
Aye.
The motion carries 4-0.
Thank you, commissioners. We will now move on to the last item on our agenda, which is agenda item number 7 is Initiator County Council application PL-CCAI 2024-000005, Bill 123, an ordinance amending Chapter 19, Article 1 and Article 13, Chapter 23, Article 9, and Chapter 5, Article 1, Article 2, Article 5, and Article 6 of the Hawaii County Code 1983, 2016 edition as amended, relating to the Ohana dwelling units, removes each instance of the term Ohana dwelling from the county code and inserts the term accessory dwelling unit and adds provisions for the establishment of an accessory dwelling unit. just want to state that I will be recusing myself for this agenda item because of my employer who provides plans and materials to build possible ADUs or Ohana units. So at this time, I will turn over the chair to Vice Chair Daniele, and I will recuse myself from this.
But I would also note that we lack quorum to hear 123 at this time, as we would then have only 3 commissioners. So we are going to have to, we will not be able to hear this before the time frame for it to be forwarded to council. And it will be automatically forwarded with an unfavorable recommendation.
Okay. Was there any testimony on this? No? Anybody on Zoom?
There is, however, if there's no quorum,
We can hear.
We can still hear
testimony,
testimony. Yeah.
And we had previously heard testimony for 121,
Yeah.
22 and 23 combined.
Okay. So should I still run the meeting to hear the testimony, or should it be Vice Chair Daniele?
You can't. It
Okay,
would be
okay.
Chair.
Right?
You can't, we can't.
What's he saying?
We can't talk. They can talk, they can testify, nothing else.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe a 2-minute break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we take a break?
Yeah, a 2-minute break. Do you want to take a
Yes.
break?
Yes, I think, let's do 5 minutes. At this time, we're going to recess, 5 minutes. We will, start back up at, 3 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, the Windward Planning Commission is now back in session. Jessica, do you have the first Zoom testifier online?
Yes, just give me a minute here.
Okay.
Okay, Chair, the first testifier is Janice Palmaglenny.
Okay. Is she on?
Janice, are you here?
No, yes, thank you. I'm not testifying on, just on 122. I'm not testifying on 123, thanks.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have another testifier on Zoom?
that was actually all that had initially signed up for 123.
Okay. I guess that concludes the Zoom part of this meeting. We'll turn this meeting back over to Chair Lynn.
Okay, thank you. So again, because this bill did not have quorum, this automatically becomes an unfavorable recommendation to the council. And at that, we are at the end of our agenda for this hearing. Is there any announcements from staff?
Chair, you have 13 items on your June 6th agenda.
Thank you.
And also a special meeting on Monday, May 6th.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'd like to present a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Perrin. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
It's been seconded by Vice Chair Daniele. All in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Windward Planning Commission is adjourned at 3:00 sharp. Oh, well, sorry, 3:04, sorry. Thank you.
And I will just note that the closed captions transcript will be terminated shortly, and those who wish to save the transcript should do so now.